Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Jennifer Paulson, our VP of Strategy. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Krista.
Thank you for joining us today. I am so excited because we're going to talk about this concept of mental health and kind of where we have seen it play as a role in our field in the workplace for churches and Christian organizations, kind of along with some of our previous experience. But I do want to go ahead and preface and mention just at the beginning of this, since this can be more of a serious conversation, that we are by no means experts in this field. This is just based on what we've seen and what we've learned through our field, but also just from prior experiences we have had. Great, so let's get started. Jennifer, I think you actually came to me with this idea of let's talk about this. And I think we've seen it. William talked about it a few weeks ago. He did a video. And I think it was something along the means of how I think 1 out of 4 pastors went and saw a counselor after COVID, just because of the strain they were under, and how honestly 4 out of 4 probably should have gone.
Well, that's what I remember from what William said. He said, 1 out of 4 did, but he said in his opinion, probably all pastors need it. And pastors, especially since so many people come to pastors with their problems, pastors then need a place to go. Anyone in the church, anyone working in the church and doing this kind of support needs a place to go to themselves to be able to get someone to understand where they're coming from and kind of help them through their issues.
No, it's a huge burden to bear. And I think COVID brought on a whole nother wave of this. I know personally, that's when I first realized was through the pandemic. I feel like I had never struggled with anything mental or anxious thoughts until the pandemic came, and everything just seemed so uncertain. You got to think, around that time was when I was looking for jobs and I was starting to enter this transition that it can already be stressful, but you throw in a global pandemic where nobody knows what they're doing.
And I was actually reading a study last week that said that right now the group that is in the most need of mental health issues or the mental health support would be women age 35 and under. So you're right in that demographic, Krista. Really, and I'm not exactly sure why it's specifically right now women, but women and younger women in general are needing a lot of support. It makes sense based on what you're saying about what's been happening in the world.
No, and I believe that. I think a huge part, I was having a conversation just with some of the girls in the office, and I think you and I touched on it of this idea, the role that social media has played in, and just the comparison and all that encompasses. You're far better than I do, and you don't have any.
I will tell you that I have avoided it for this long, and I'm going to continue. I do not do any social media. I don't look at it. I don't think about it. I don't talk about it. And I think my life is much better because of it.
Do it as long as you can. If my job wasn't so involved in social media.
You have to.
No, that's so funny that you mentioned that. My husband doesn't have social media for the longest
time.
Know that. He has it, but he deleted it for a while.
Good for him.
Yes, he's very good at that. But it's funny because he doesn't fully understand. He's like, well, why do you put yourself through that? He doesn't understand the benefit. And there are benefits. There's a lot of benefits, but of course there are some negatives that have come along with that.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is in terms of like physical health, how people, physical health is considered something that people work toward and that they want. And it's kind of like, if you're physically healthy, people think, oh, wow, that means that she takes really good care of herself. And it's a positive thing. But I think that with mental health, I think right now there's still a stigma attached to it that if you're dealing with mental health issues, there's something wrong with you. Whereas if you're dealing with physical issues, there's nothing wrong with you. It's out of your control. But if you're dealing with mental health issues, it's like, why didn't you try harder? Why don't you do this, this, and this? And people are still a little bit less supportive that that's an actual issue.
It's true. I think there's a huge stigma of that. And I think we talked about, for me, mine was mental and physical, where I struggled, is the effects of my mental health, and the decline of my mental health led straight into my physical effects, my exhaustion levels, my tiredness, my energy, even my work at that point is what was affected from that. It took over almost every part of my life. And so that's when I remember at a point losing weight was a huge effect of mine. And I remember people being like, wow, you've lost so much weight. Good for you. And I was like, I didn't mean to.
No.
I did not mean to do this.
Well, and I think that's a good point, Krista, that people can't see necessarily what's going on inside your mind. They don't know. So they just saw the physical effects of it, but it really started in your mind. And I think that schools might be doing a better job than when we were in school. I'm not exactly sure, but young children need to learn emotional coping mechanisms. They need to learn about emotions. They need to learn about interacting with people. they need to learn all of these things so that when they get to be our age, they have a way to handle it. Because for me, and it sounds like for you too, when situations came and maybe put us into this headspace that we weren't familiar with, we didn't know how to get out of it because we hadn't ever been given the tools to do so. Whereas with physical health, you can go work out, you can go for a walk, but with mental health, that's a lot more challenging. You're trapped in your mind. Yeah.
That's a good point. I think you mentioned mental health kind of being this in your head. It can be this very alone thing. And I think that's a huge part we talked about of bringing things into light, kind of hitting on the tangibles of bringing things out, getting help, reaching out to your church. I mean, we've talked about there's a huge role that the church can play in this, and Christian education can play in this with their students, because it really is affecting almost everyone at this point.
It really is. I think that's a great point. I think we can speak as women. As women, we definitely need community. And a lot of times when people are going through mental health struggles, they pull back because they don't want to be a burden to their friends or their family, and they're afraid to, not necessarily even afraid, but we just like taking care of ourselves and we don't want to ask someone else to help us.
No.
But for women especially, I know community is really important. Church is a great provider of that, friends and family, but make sure that you take advantage of the people around you when you're going through struggles.
You bring up a great point. I've realized recently, I actually recently read, or I'm reading right now with a group of friends, a book by Jenny Allen called Find Your People. And she emphasizes this whole concept of biblical community and the importance of it, the reasons we were made for community, how God made us this way. But she talks about the American culture and we're in Houston, so the Western culture is very individualistic. We're independent. We don't want to rely on anyone for help. And she talks about how that's changed over years and how the rise of mental health we've seen along with that. So it used to be, she uses this example. We used to go and knock on our neighbor's door when we needed something. If we needed an egg, we would go and borrow one. And now we don't. We go to the store. We send your husband to the store or whatnot. And we just have this, we don't want to burden anyone. We don't want to ask for anything. For me, it's a prideful thing. If I'm being completely honest, I don't want anyone to have to think I need anything or I rely on anyone. And so it's just so crazy to me how we used to be more village-like. We needed each other more. And now we have these individual homes.
I live in an apartment complex or a big apartment high-rise building, and I know the girl across the hall from me, but that's it. You don't know the people around you. And then that makes it harder for you to find a community when people are just really not talking to each other as much. They're talking over social media, or they're talking over texting. Yeah.
I actually met our neighbor yesterday for the first time.
Oh, wow.
We happened to be walking in at the same time and introduced ourselves. But I mean, it's easy to just turn your head down in the elevator and not talk to anyone, right?
It is. It completely is. It completely is. Well, Christy, you shared a little bit about what you've gone through. I'm almost twice your age, and I've gone through quite a bit of issues, kind of similar to what you're talking about. But I think something that's important is that there are coping strategies. There are things that you can do to help. So I think we should probably talk about a couple of those things. I would say something as a Christian woman that's helped me. One of the top things is Pastor Joel Osteen says, erase and replace. So if you have a negative thought in your mind, if you have a racing thought or an anxious thought, a depressing thought, try to erase that and replace it with God's word. So I brought my Bible verse pack here.
I love it.
Got my Bible verses.
You keep this on your desk.
I do. And so these are just Bible verses that kind of speak to different things that I've gone through. And so I can erase the thought and I can speak the Bible verse. So like this one is John 14. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid. So if you're speaking those things over, then there's not as much place for the negative and for those kind of the devil to come and attack you, because you are speaking out the word of God. Yeah. So in terms of something that has helped me, I would say that this book of Bible verses is pretty helpful.
I love how colorful it is too.
Yes.
So fun.
Yes. Yeah.
No, that's very similar. One thing I got, and actually this was from a Christian counselor that I go to that was recommended from our pastor, which is such a great resource. But one thing she helped me with was finding those pinpoint moments for me. So for me, it's in the morning. Right when I get up in the morning is when I'm the most anxious, because I immediately get up, I'm getting ready, and I start thinking about everything that I have to do that day, the to-do list, the schedule, the meetings, making sure I get everything done and how I'm going to conquer that. And so in the bathroom in the morning is one of those moments. And for me, what I've had to do is just stop my brain and just repeat something over and over and over again. For me, it's Psalms 56:3. I can just repeat it over. When I'm afraid, I'll trust in you, time and time, until I can reset my brain.
I love that too,
Mhm.
Krista. That also, so that's something that I kind of learned when I was in college was thought stopping.
Mm.
So I think what you did there is you took that thought and then you just started repeating a positive thought
Right.
to replace it. But another thing that might work is thought stopping, where if you're thinking those negative things, like literally imagine a stop sign in your brain and
Mm.
just be like, stop. And you're telling your mind, you're telling your body that that thought is not allowed to continue in your mind.
I love that. It is. It's so helpful. And it's these little things. And for me, I had to learn them either through friends that had gone through things
Mhm.
or people like you that have been able to share your wisdom. But at the time, I was early 20s and had no idea how to stop these things. And for me, it was Christian counseling that was the most helpful and beneficial. And while it's not for everyone, for me, it was a great gift. I think that the Lord gave to my counselor to be able
Mhm.
to help in those ways, and just how he uses people to speak through.
That's a really good point.
Mhm.
And we're really lucky that we have those people, and that's more kind of common than it was a long time ago.
Right.
When I was going through these things in college, they're really, I mean, I'm 44, so that would have been like, 24 years ago.
Mhm.
There may have been Christian counselors. I went to a secular college,
Mhm.
and so I went to a counselor on the campus,
Oh, wow.
which was very helpful. It didn't bring my Christianity into play, and I think
Right.
leaning on your faith during this time is super helpful. It was still very helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, that's so critical.
Another thing I wanted to talk about, Krista, was something. I used to worry quite a lot. Now I'm way past it.
Oh, I'm
I
sure.
never worry
Never.
about it. You've never seen me worry about this. But something that was kind of poignant for me was I was listening to a Joyce Meyer sermon, and she said that worrying is actually sin
Mm,
because we're not giving it to God. And when
wow.
then that really convicted me because it made me feel like, oh my gosh, it's a little self-indulgent to worry. And that's not the point that I want to get across. But if you think about the fact that God didn't make us to worry, and when we're worrying, we're actually saying that we don't trust Him.
Mhm.
And that's just a good reminder of not worrying, because we are Christians, and as Christians, we trust that God is going to bring us through this. We may not understand why or how, but He wants us to be thinking on positive things. He doesn't want us to be worrying and not trusting He's going to take care of us.
I love that. For me, it was coming to the realization that, wow, I'm not trusting God because I have control
Mhm.
issues. I
Mm.
have to control everything in my life and keep things organized. And I like them all tight and neat and pretty and with a bow on top. And that is just not the way life goes sometimes. And so as soon as I felt like I was losing control, there went my trust in God.
Well, Krista, you and I are exactly alike in that area, because I also am very, very controlling. And I think that it may be harder for people like us who are very controlling to break that and trust God.
Mhm.
And that's because in my childhood, there were lots of things that were outside of my control. So now
Right.
as an adult, I want to try to keep myself safe and protect myself by controlling. But what I have to remind myself is it's not my responsibility to keep myself safe. God will.
Mhm.
So we've got to give it over to God and just trust.
Which is way easier said than done.
I will say that in the rare moments that I can do that, I will say that it feels like a weight is off my shoulders.
Doesn't
And
it?
you probably felt like that too.
Oh, yes.
I go for long walks, and as soon as I am able to fully give it over to God, even if it's just for a few minutes,
Mhm.
I just feel like, oh, this is just amazing.
Right. I love that.
Now we just have to figure out a way to make it last longer.
Seriously, than the few minutes that you get. That's so great. No, I love that we've kind of been able to hit on this topic. One thing I want to talk about is, I mean, for you, you're in a leadership position, and
Yep.
a lot of people that we are talking to are in these leadership positions. They're pastors and educators, and y'all are leading while working through some of this stuff, or you're working with people who are going through this stuff. So I want to hit on both sides of that.
Krista, I think that's really important. Something that I've learned, I've been in management for maybe 15 years, maybe 15, 20 years. And something that I've learned is you can't just manage your team with their workload. Like, so when you're having frequent one-on-ones, at least once a week, have one-on-ones with your team members, but you need to be talking about more than just their work. You need to be asking those questions. How are you doing? How are you feeling? What are your thoughts? You need to be checking in with them, because as leaders, especially as Christian leaders, it's our responsibility to pour some of that love and support into our employees.
Mhm.
And it's like we said at the beginning, physical health being as important, or mental health is probably more important, I would say, but equally important. But as a leader, you're responsible for pouring into your employees and making sure that they're emotionally healthy. And I don't think we should be skirting those questions when we're meeting with our employees.
I think that's great. I think our one-on-ones are one of the most beneficial things that we do. And we actually do a meeting with Megan, one of our coworkers, and we love Megan. Shout out to Megan if she's listening. But that's one thing that I love that you touch base with her on is, how are you doing, Megan? How's this week? Where are you at mentally, physically? Like, how are you doing? Because it's important and it affects so much, and we care about her. We genuinely care about her.
It's 100% true. And Kristen and I have seen, we've talked with her over the past couple months, and we've seen her start exercising. We've seen her start eating healthy with her smoothies that she's been getting, and she's got more energy and she's feeling happier and healthier. And I think that should just become an expected part of being a manager, is that taking care of your employees. Yeah,
that's great.
But you said there were two parts as the pastor,
yeah,
right?
so kind of how you do that, but then also like leading through. So you're in a position probably where you don't have many people checking in on you.
Oh, that's so true. That's so true.
And I'm sure a lot of so think of a senior pastor, lead pastor, where not many people are checking in on that position in that chair.
Krista, that's a really good point. And I will say that my first couple months here at Vanderbloemen, I was going through something pretty stressful, and I was trying to make sure that no one saw that. And I was holding that in, and that was really challenging.
Right.
So I think that's a really good point. And that probably goes back to William's advice at the beginning, that pastors need to have a counselor or a group of people that they can trust and be open and honest with, because as leaders, you don't want to appear vulnerable. And I do think that that's still important. I don't think the right thing to do is to, give all of your problems over to your employees and say, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with that. I really do think that there does need to be a boundary there coming from you as a leader, but that's not to say that you don't need an outlet, and you do need an outlet and a community of people to share what you're going through with, so that you can be that strong person that your team needs you to be at work.
No, I think that's great. I love that. I think that's a really good piece of tangible advice in that position.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
Was there anything else I'm forgetting?
Well,
I feel like there was something else you wanted to mention.
We have a bunch of things. I could talk for hours about this, but something that we were talking about, Krista, is that we're saying that we're coming from the women's perspective, and we're not sure from necessarily the men's perspective what it's feeling like. But you were talking about your husband.
Oh yes, the difference. So I've realized, recently got married not too long ago, and just learning more and more about how different the Lord makes male and female, and just the beauty in that, but also the challenge in that. And for us specifically, when I was struggling through engagement, struggled really hard with my anxiety and the stress. And my sweet husband, guys are what's the word? Problem solvers. Yes, he sees a problem and he wants to solve it. He's ready to start fixing things. He's a fixer right away. And I want to feel it. I want to talk about it. I just want to be comforted. And so we had to navigate that of, if I was going through something, I would come to him and I just wanted to be hugged or held and told it was going to be okay as a female. And that's how I naturally comfort those around me. And he was immediately like, well, you got to do this. Let's do that. And it was almost harmful, or not harmful, but it was hurtful to feel like I thought he was trying to just push past it. But in reality, he's like, no, I want to fix it for you. I don't want you to go through this. And so communication on that is super important when it comes to whether that's a leadership role or male and female working together.
I think what you're saying is that sometimes all that's needed is support and validation.
Yes.
Even if the person can't solve it, if you know that someone who cares about you is supporting you and hearing you, that's enough to make you feel like what you're going through is normal.
Right.
And I think that's something that we also need to make sure that we communicate, which is that struggles with depression or anxiety or any of these type of things are normal. It's not abnormal. I would say it probably over 90% of the population deals with these things. So if we can make it more normal and bring it out to light, as I think is happening more and more these days.
I definitely think so. And kind of just a little bit of a plug on Vanderbloemen, going back to just the importance of having a culture that encompasses this, because it is becoming more and more important. It's becoming more of a factor. I think it's definitely on the rise, and we've seen that, and we've talked a lot about and written several blogs about where EQ falls in the workplace. And so if we can help you with that, please just let us know. We would love to continue helping. That's part of building a great team, is being able to have that healthy culture.
I agree. We do culture consulting, which is really helpful, staff consulting, and even just, having Vanderbloemen come in, talk to your staff and see what your staff is thinking and feeling, and maybe what areas you guys could grow as a company.
Yeah.
As a church.
Yes.
I'm from the business world.
Yes, which we love about you. Brings a huge perspective. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much.
Did the time already go past, Kristen?
It goes fast in here. It goes so fast in here. But we are so thankful for you and your leadership, but also just your insight in this topic. I know that it's a really important one to you, and I just think that's really valuable. So we're going to go ahead and cut this one off and end here. But if you need anything, we will be attaching everything in the show notes that you can get on our website. As always, feel free to go to vanderbloemen.com/contact us if you need anything. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, Krista.